Good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN Weekly for Saturday, October 30th, 2021. And our top story today, Halloween costume sales pop. Is it a measure for the overall state of business? Joining me now to discuss this and a lot more, Natalie Walters is the business reporter for the Dallas Morning News. Natalie, great to see you again. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me. I think it's been a bit since I was last on here, so it's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. And let's talk about a story you wrote several weeks ago about Halloween and Halloween sales. You know, we're on the eve of All Hallows Eve, right? So kids are getting ready to trick or treat. And costume sales, at least in the Dallas area, going up significantly. What do you make of all this?
Yeah, it's been interesting. So I talked with a few local costume shop owners, and they said they're seeing what looks to be perhaps record numbers this year. And, it's based on a lot of things. People were tired of being sort of cooped up inside. They maybe missed Halloween last year. Some people said, we have more money to spend because, we didn't travel this past year. So we thought, why not go get a nice costume for ourselves this year? They've also noticed that, a lot of people this year want to come out to the shops and try on costumes and you kind of get that fun costume experience versus ordering something on Amazon, because we've been ordering on Amazon for 2 years straight, basically, and not been sort of allowed to shop out in the open safely and have a good time like that. So there's, for some specific numbers, the NRF is saying that they anticipate, total money spent on costumes to be around 10 billion, and that's about 2 billion higher than previous years. So
that's significant. And
yes.
Any idea of what the hot, I don't watch a lot of TV. So what is the hot costume? Is it I don't know. What is the hot costume these days?
I asked a couple costume shop owners, and they said they've seen a lot of people want to dress up like Peaky Blinders. I've not seen that show, but
I don't know who that is.
it's they said there's, I think they sort of dress up like sort of British characters, like the long coattails and stuff. So I think I want to say it's a British show. And then, they said last year Tiger King was big, and a few other sort of Netflix shows that sort of blew up in quarantine. And then he said a lot of people are doing sort of 80s, 70s, 50s, that sort of look. So yeah, I talked with this one guy, Jerry Purvis, because he owns a really unique Halloween shop in Dallas where they have, just unlimited amount of one of a kind costumes. And, it goes back as far as you can see. Nothing you see in there is something you're going to really see on Amazon. And it's unique because these costumes are definitely more expensive, but he said he's seeing so many people come in because they want something unique this year. They want something fun and they want to try things on, and, they have a little bit more money. And he's also in a great position because, obviously there's been a lot of supply chain issues this year across all industries, including Halloween costumes, but he is, an avid collector. Anytime he sees something, he buys it. He doesn't care if it never gets sold. He just thinks it looks cool. He's going to buy it. So when you go into his store, it looks like a warehouse, but like a nice, well-designed, cozy warehouse, not, the bright lights and everything. So it is good on stock, even if things don't come in when he expects it to, whereas, other places, that, may have more trouble with, their costumes being out on a ship somewhere and not at the store by Halloween.
Yeah. How do you relate this? So I get it. I mean, people have been cooped up, want to go out and see people. It's fun. Halloween is fun, even for us older folks, our grown up folks. It's probably more fun for the kids. But how do you relate all this to the current business climate? You mentioned supply chain issues. How does this relate to the overall business environment in Dallas, but also nationally?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of businesses that are suffering from these supply chain issues, and there's not too much they can do about it. And it's hard when you have something that's really in high demand, but you just can't get enough to bring it, to the customers that are wanting to buy it. It's interesting, there's a lot of industries that are starting to, recover and starting to see, some return back to normality. But at the same time, we're just coming out of the Delta variant quarter, and companies are just starting to report those earnings. So we're seeing, not great numbers, but probably for the next quarter, for the fourth quarter, we'll see some more improvement. I've been looking at life insurers this week, and they've obviously had to pay out so many more life insurance claims than would be typical in a year, just because we had over 700,000 deaths from COVID in the US. And, they were starting to see some recovery in the second quarter, and they were all predicting that, they were on the up and up, and then Delta hit. And now we're going to see probably worse numbers for this quarter than any of the previous ones. So those will come out over the next week from life insurers, and it'll be interesting to see what they say.
Yeah, it really is I think the recovery, if anyone thinks this was going to be an immediate recovery, clearly this is going to take a lot of time to get back up to snuff. And we really don't know what lurks around the corner as it relates to this virus. All right, I'm going to give you a couple of softball questions here, Natalie. First of all, what are you dressing up as for Halloween, or are you dressing up for Halloween? Because you have young nieces and nephews.
I do. They are being the Paw Patrol characters. There's probably some viewers out there who know them. One is being the pink one, and one is being Rebel. Sky is the pink one, I believe. But I'm not dressing up this year. I'll be in Atlanta for a concert with a few friends, so that'll be my Halloween.
Okay, so you'll be a concert goer.
Yeah.
That sounds like fun. And let me ask you, what's your favorite Halloween candy? Is it the dipped apple?
Oh, wow.
I don't even know if you can you give candy anymore these days, because you have to have it like X-rayed and vetted for everything. But
Yes.
But in the old days, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, my old days, your old days.
Okay, my old days.
What's your
Butterfinger, Reese's Pieces, yeah, all of those. But honestly, I don't know. I'm almost 30 now, and my tastes have changed. Now I'd probably just go down to our local fudge shop and get something there over the candy.
That sounds very good. You have made my mouth water. I'm going to head down to the fudge store as well. Natalie Walters, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
Thank you. Good to be back. Happy Halloween.
Thanks, Natalie. Great to see you. Thanks for sharing your perspective. And when we come back, we'll take a look at some of our best segments for the week. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN Weekly. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit Repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. On Tuesday, I sat down with Virginia 529 CEO Mary Morris to learn lessons parents can learn from today's student loan debt crisis. Let's take a look.
Thinking about starting with community college, for example, starting by living at home and saving some of those expenses, looking for the least expensive schools, not assuming that you won't qualify for federal financial aid. I think a lot of sort of middle income or upper middle income families believe that they don't have any opportunities for financial aid, and they might. And there are some differences between public schools and private schools. I think often individuals think, oh, the public school must be the least expensive option, when in fact, sometimes there's more financial aid at a private school. So they just need to do their homework and really think about what works. And they need to start earlier than most families do. So that's another trap. Don't wait until junior or senior year to think about what might be affordable. Of course, you should start really early and save in a 529 account, but that's a different conversation. Frank Bruni wrote a great book on that. I cannot remember the exact title of it, but it'll come to me while we're talking probably. And he makes a great case for that you can get a wonderful education in any number of places. Small schools, big schools, private schools, public schools. You can get started at community college and get those, sort of the gut courses, the intro courses. Probably a savings of a third to a half in some states, the cost of community college versus a 4-year degree. And honestly, no one cares where you started. They maybe care about where you finished. So although even that really doesn't persist very long, the key is to find the right fit for each student. And, wanting to go to a large public university, that might not be a good fit for you. If you start at a smaller school or closer to home, and you just think about things like that. If you've got an 18-year-old that's never lived away from home, going all the way across country, they might be perfectly ready for it. That might be the best thing for them. Other students aren't going to be ready for that. So you need to know yourself. You need to know your kids. You need to know where you are on that spectrum and figure out what's best for you. But the big ticket schools, the big name schools will not necessarily give you a better education. You also want to think about what you want to do when you graduate, right? Don't take on a lot of debt. Don't go to a more expensive school necessarily if you know that you want to work in a profession or in a job that isn't going to pay you enough to pay back the loans if that's what you end up taking on. I think that's really where the student debt comes from, or the problem comes from sometimes. People have unrealistic expectations. They might go to an expensive private school and they want to be a school teacher, which is great. We need more of them, but it is not the highest paying job in the country. And so you need to think about that. What's going to be realistic to be able to pay back if you haven't been able to save for it? There are tools in different places. We have tools under our Smart Savers accounts that families can start planning really when they're very young, even before they're in school. The family can start planning. But as kids are going through, hopefully they're getting some financial education. They're getting financially appropriate lessons, even starting in elementary school. And that's not too early to start talking about it. We work with a program called Junior Achievement. Jumpstart's another one. There are several programs like that start with early childhood education. And they talk about wants versus needs. right? And resources and limited resources. And so all of those are simple lessons, but you can start teaching kids about, what do you need for a good education? What do you need to do the job that you want to do versus what you might like to do? The student might tell you, well, I want to go to school and not picking on Florida, but I want to go to University of South Florida because I want to live in South Florida. That might not be the best fit. And if you're not a Florida resident, then that could be a very expensive option. If you're a Florida resident, it's probably very feasible because Florida schools for in-state residents are quite inexpensive on a relative basis. So you have to think about all of those things. So it's a constant. It's having that discussion. It's having families not being afraid to talk about what is realistic and say, so we always suggest having, like I said, a 529 account or some kind of savings dedicated for higher education. The message in that to a child is, this is important. Education's important. And as a family, we're going to work on this. So maybe you work in the summers as they become teenagers, and we're going to ask you to put a little bit of your money into your 529 account. You can see what we've funded it with. Show them the balances and look how it can grow. Look at, if it's invested in something that may have some volatility, sometimes it goes down. That's not a bad lesson to learn, to start learning about how you manage that. And often, it's the parents that need the education as well. So, and I've seen that before when we've been to different events. I used to go to the state fair, and some kids would come up with their parents, and the parents didn't really want to talk to us. They're like, that's not for me. And the kids would look at them and say, I'm going to go to college. Do you understand that? And so it was uncomfortable sometimes. I'd be listening to that, but it's an uncomfortable conversation, but it's one that families need to have. So it can start from either side and then start thinking about what's realistic. What can your family afford? And that's going to be different for each one. What are your priorities and how do you make it work? Is it that big school experience? Do you want that bigger campus? Do you want urban? Do you want rural? Do you want a small school? What's important to you, and then figure out what makes sense. The one thing that I'll say that I think is maybe the most important message is to make sure that the student's ready to go to college. Make sure that they're ready for that experience, because the one thing that we know about the cost and the issue of student debt is that the students with the biggest problem, biggest challenge in repaying, the majority of those that are in default are students who haven't completed. So they've taken on some student debt, but they didn't finish their degree program, their community college program, their certificate program. And so they haven't gotten the skills. They may not get the job that will allow them to pay that debt back, but they have debt. And they may not have fully realized what they were undertaking and how fast they'd have to start paying it back once they stopped attending. And so that creates a real problem. The average debt right now, I think, for someone graduating with a 4-year degree is about $30,000, which can be manageable, right? That's not out of reason. That's not even, a top of the line car. That's a car that a young adult might want to acquire and have to pay for. So that's manageable. But for some lower income students, for some ones that maybe don't have as much family assistance, their parents didn't go to school, they don't have the resources to really deal with this because they don't have the background and the experience, they don't have the financial education, they don't complete the degree. It's really less than 10,000. Students with less than 10,000 in student debt are the ones that are really struggling. And we hear all the horror stories about 6-figure debt. That can be really challenging. Some do take that on, but in most instances, those are students that have taken on graduate school debt. And so again, they at least have a better likelihood, if they're completing graduate school, of being able to pay that debt back. So it's really important, I think, as a country, as we think about the student debt issue, to think about really where the true problems are and how we can try to solve that.
And I also spoke this week with Fremont Mortgage Corporation's Carl Delmont about what you need to know before applying for a mortgage. Let's take a look.
Really, with everything in life, you want to be proactive, not reactive. So if you think you're going to buy 3 months, 6 months, even 12 months from now, what you really want to do is sit down and take a look at your credit report. And you can always go online, but those are typically consumer models. So they'll give you a gauge, but it's not super accurate. But find a loan officer that's willing to work with you and tell them, I'm probably a year away. And you'll be surprised how many will tell you, well, call me in a year. The good one's going to say, well, let's see what you look like now. And they'll pull your credit, tell you where you are, give you the steps you need to get a better credit score. And then you want to sit down, look at your budget and figure out where you want to be and everything else. The other thing you want to do is research all the grants and programs. There's a lot of them that are just basically specific to the county or the state or the city that you live in. There's a lot of different grants that can help you. Grants, remember, you don't have to pay those back. There's other first-time home buyer programs. I know Maryland has one that helps you pay off up to $40,000 of student loan debt when you buy the house. So other states have things like that as well. So you want to look around and find out what all the options are. And then, of course, after you figure all these things out, make plans that make sure that you're not going to go out and charge up your credit cards. There's a TikTok video a couple of weeks ago where a girl went on there and said, oh my God, I opened a Home Depot account and just lost my mortgage approval. Now I can't buy a house. So there's little things like that you want a loan officer to warn you, hey, don't do it. It's like that, eat this, not that. When it's mortgage, it's don't borrow this, don't open that account, all those things. So they can give you the whole blueprint so that you know what you're doing, so you don't make those mistakes that could cost you and maybe delay or maybe prevent you from buying a house. Again, it's not one size fits all. And, I've seen people who talk to the wrong loan officer, and that loan officer said, oh, you have $1,200 cash. Let's pay off this one credit card. And their score goes up 4 points. Whereas in the right hand, you might be able to pay, say, $117 towards that, say, Target credit card, get maybe 15 points and still have, over $1,000 in savings that you can use for moving and other things there. So, and to this, you also want to make sure that you get a solid pre-approval. There's a pre-qualification. Pre-qualification is you call a lender and you say, I make this much. Here's my social security number. They pull your credit. It's based on what you told them. A pre-approval, it takes a little bit more work and a little bit more money for the lender. But what they do is they actually underwrite the loan as far as they possibly can. So obviously they don't have the appraisal or warranty or anything else, but basically they're looking at your taxes, your pay stubs, everything else. When you're out there, one of 15 people bidding on a house, it's going to make you shine a lot more than the other prospects out there. In the past, well, even to this day, if you pay rent, it's not going to go and impact your credit score. It's just not reported, so there's no way to categorize that. But Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac came out and said, you know what? There's so many people who could possibly become homeowners. Well, how do we take advantage of that? So what they're doing now is they're actually allowing credit for your rent. So what happens is they can take your financing. Now, it doesn't affect the pricing. You're still going to look at the scores and everything else, but it's an added boost. The other thing that they just came out with is a credit scores. So it was always the middle credit score of the both borrowers. So if you say had a 750, a 700, and a 650, 700 middle score, if the person you're buying the house with was 700, 650, 600, there's 650 middle score, they would have to use that. In this case, they would use the top score for the qualifying purposes, but you would still be for add-on fees and everything else, and the pricing would be on the lower to middle score. And then they just came out and said they're going to do desktop appraisals, which is another perk because that's going to speed up the process as well, because we have fewer appraisers due to the SAFE Act back in 2010. And the ones that are still out there are so busy right now. So it's really, really tough. And then if you have a natural disaster like a hurricane or anything like that, then those appraisers have to go back out again and verify that the house is still standing in good shape. So the people who are in line next have to wait even longer because you have to go back to the first person. So this desktop appraisals are going to help out a lot. But it really does seem like FHFA, which oversees Fannie and Freddie, is really trying to encourage home ownership and make the right decision. So it's very, very encouraging. So you're going to be recording fees for the courthouse, everything else, origination fees, appraisal, earnest money deposit, which will go towards your down payment. There's a number of fees. But what I tell clients is when you hear like no closing cost loans, right, what that means is you're going to pay a higher rate. So the easiest way to think of it is like this. You have the lowest rate, but it'll probably have the highest closing costs. You're going to have the highest rate, which will have the lowest closing cost. What you want to figure out is where on that scale should you be? And typically it's a little bit more down here, because if you go over here with the highest rate but the lowest closing costs, your break even is farther down the road. So it could be moot if you have to go that way. But maybe you don't want to pay a lot of fees and not worry about the lowest rate. So typically, because what happens is lenders, they can mark up the rate and they can make a profit and use that to offset some of those closing costs for you. So if you don't have a lot of money, that's another way to do it. You can actually sort of subsidize yourself by taking a slightly higher rate. The other thing is if you're putting less than 20% down, most programs have what's called mortgage insurance. There's some programs out there you can do lender paid, borrower paid. It's a lump sum. So what happens is in exchange for a slightly higher rate, it's built into the payment versus having that monthly payment. But again, you want to look at all your options, because if you take the conventional mortgage insurance, after a certain period of time, if you have the equity and everything else, you can actually ask to have it removed. So there's a lot of choices. And I think that the best thing a good loan officer can do for their client is to go over all the choices, not just say, oh yeah, here you go, here's your rate. You should go over, here's the program or programs, here's the term, here's the pros and cons of each, here's one with mortgage insurance, here's one with lender paid, here's one with borrower paid. And it gets a little confusing, but again, this is the biggest probably purchase of your life and the biggest monthly payment of your budget. You should probably know going in. The last thing you want to do is imagine going to a restaurant and just order some off the menu. And after you pay the check and you walk out and you hear the waiter talking about the stuffed lobster special for $20. You're like, man, I would have had that had I known. Right, that's a small thing, but if you're going to get a mortgage that big, you probably want to know all the things on the menu before you make that decision and walk out the door, right? Yeah, I mean, the internet is full of good information and full of bad information. What I would say is, talk to people at work, talk to your family members, ask them, hey, did you buy a house? Did you refinance? What was the realtor? What were they like? Did you like them? What was the loan officer like? And get that testimonial, because that's really going to be someone from you trust, right? You can call around everything else, but a lot of lenders are really good at marketing, but maybe not quite as good at actually getting the deal done. So what I always tell people is, there's two R words: rates and results. You kind of want the results, because if someone offers you an amazing rate, but they can't deliver the settlement, there's just going to cost you so much more money. So go with a trusted lender, do some investigation, some due diligence, ask around. And, a lot of them will have testimonials. Make sure that they're real, not just made up. But again, if you ask around, that firsthand referral, that's probably the best way to go about doing it.
Well, certainly great segments. I want to thank all of our great contributors this week. That wraps up this episode of BRN Weekly. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement, markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, all in one place, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. We're back again tomorrow for BRN Sunday. I'll be joined by members of the media, academia, and financial services as we analyze all the news for the week. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Are you being audited, and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a Tax Doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.